They're schemers. Schemers trying to control their little worlds. I'm not a schemer. When the chips are down, these civilized people, they'll eat each other. And here we go.
Well, hello there. How is everyone? I hope you're all well. You amazing, beautiful, wonderful people. You're looking absolutely amazing on this weekday. Weekday, you see. Can't get that wrong, can I? Not until Saturday. But anyway, we're going to get straight into the meat and potatoes, as this is video 2 of 2. That's it, 2 for Tuesday. Better than Domino's. Well, the same as Domino's, technically. Now, I could do 3 videos. I might do. We'll see. Am I on par with Domino's, or am I better than? I bet I taste better. Better taste better. But anyway, we're talking about the Amazon Prime documentary, which is on the Idaho 4. I can actually watch it in the UK. I don't know what I was trying to do previously. I don't think I was actually logged into the account, so it wouldn't show me it. But I managed to watch episode 1. I could have binge watched it, but I didn't want to binge watch it. I just want to watch one at a time, and then I can remember and obviously have a discussion with you guys. But what it is a 4-part documentary, which is this. And we've got this first one, which their synopsis, if you like, is the idyllic University of Idaho campus in the small college town of Moscow, Idaho, is shattered when 4 popular college students, Ethan, Kaylee, Maddie, and Xana, are found murdered in an off-campus house on a Sunday morning in November 2022. Shock turns to fear when the police reveal there is no suspected killer in custody and no clear motive. The killer could be anyone in that community. Now, look, the first one is obviously a bit more of an introduction to who the victims are. And it brings you back down to earth, because ultimately the Idaho 4 case has become a bit of a beast, a bit of a monster. Do you know what I mean? And it is quite sad, but it's just how these cases go. You know, I don't think anyone intentionally turns the case into what it becomes on social media, but ultimately, I think for a long time it's almost been like the Brian Koberger show. Sometimes we've got the Brian Koberger versus Steve Gonsalves situation, but at the very heart of it, this episode 1 really brings it back to earth, that ultimately there were 4 people who lost their lives. What pisses you off even more about this is the fact that there are some big people and big names and big channels and important people around this situation that don't seem to be able to get their fucking names right, whether it's the spelling of them in articles, whether it's the pronunciation of names. It's a little bit disrespectful, and I just find it, it's uncalled for. But yeah, these students were obviously they're at the heart of it, and the tragedy of it all is that they deserve justice. Whatever happened, they deserve to get the right justice, and that does, and I must say, it does include, if Brian Koberger did indeed do this crime, then it absolutely does warrant execution in my eyes. As someone who was in the UK, we don't have the death penalty in the UK, not since 1960, I believe, around the 1962, 63, which was our last hanging in the UK. But ultimately, I've been interested in it since I was at school age. My finals exam was, and the what I wrote up on was capital punishment across the United States. But this crime absolutely ticks all the boxes, should we say. And look, as someone who sits here and I turn around and say Brian Koberger, in my opinion, has not been shown to be publicly guilty beyond a reasonable doubt of this crime, ultimately he's pled guilty to it. Now, pleading guilty and saying, and proving that you did it are 2 very, very different things. It's and there's a fine line between it, because we do know, even though it's rare, probably not as rare as some may think, but people can be leveraged into admitting to doing something that they simply didn't do. And who knows behind closed door what leverage people have on them. So look, I'm a skeptic. I'm a free thinker. and I will look at every single thing. And I do live by this. If you're going to execute someone, then you absolutely need to be 100% sure. And that should include the public being shown every single thing, absolute transparency. And I believe that if you're going to go down the route of taking someone's life away, whether it be execution or even if it be by putting someone in a cage and throwing away the key for the rest of their life, then I believe this should always go to trial. I don't believe there should ever be a situation where it doesn't go to trial, and every single thing should be shown and it should run through that process. But look, what did we learn in this situation? There was some things that was answered and there were some things that weren't. And the first thing that I'll say is, look, the 911 call, there's always been a bit of a bone of contention around the 911 call, but it kind of plays out in this episode. Like, I was quite uncomfortable about it because it was very, very focused on Xana and Ethan, and it was like Maddie and Kaylee were an afterthought. And I'm thinking to myself, even with the two surviving roommates in the house, why would they not have tried to go and see anybody? Why would, you've got two individuals. So even if Maddie's a bit of a, not Maddie, sorry. There's me saying about people getting people's names wrong, and then I do that, You got the two surviving roommates. You got Dylan Mortensen and Bethany Funk. And you think, why wouldn't one of them, Bethany maybe, who hasn't seen what the other one has seen, why would she not think, oh, fuck it, I'll go and knock on their door. I'll go and knock on Kaylee and Maddie's doors. Do you know what I mean? Because they're obviously in the house as well. Do you know what I mean? If you're not automatically considering that everybody has been killed in the house, which seems to be that everybody else is like, it's almost like you wouldn't go there. You wouldn't think that. So why did they not do anything? Why is everybody's thought processes nothing like that happens in Idaho? Do you know what I mean? Nothing like that happens in Moscow. We don't even lock the fucking doors. We've never heard of it. Like, this is the furthest thing from thinking ever. But you've got two people who are seemingly in a house and don't know what's going on, and it just sits uncomfortable with me. And what my question is, I still, bearing in mind that it took them a little bit of time to get to Brian Koberger, for instance, I do wonder how the two surviving roommates were cleared as quickly as what they were, how that clearing them came about. Even Steve Gonsalves would make a comment early on saying, I feel that some people were cleared too soon. And I feel that if people were genuinely cleared too soon, it was these two individuals with a lack of, clarity on what had happened here. Even with law enforcement saying we believe this was contained, this was targeted, you almost got to think, well, fuck me. The only way that even makes sense is that you think that the people who were in the house and survived it were involved in it. Do you know what I mean? It's almost, you get that vibe. But look, the 911 call, you've got Hunter who comes over, and it plays out like he's walking to the house, and the two surviving roommates, Dylan Mortons and Bethany Funk, are outside, and he goes into the house. And he goes into Xana's room, and by all accounts, it sounds like this. What we're doing, we're looking at how this portrays it, and it portrays it like they're outside the house, he goes into the house, and he kind of shields everyone from it. So he goes in there, ushers everyone out, say, look, go out, get on the phone, and just tell them someone's unconscious. Do you know what I mean? Say someone's unconscious, as if to say, he don't want to tell anyone what he's seen, because he would go on to say what he saw, and he clearly knew that they weren't unconscious. This was a brutal, frenzied attack. He was aware of that at the point that the call was made. But the issue is the call, how you hear the call and how the call plays out, and we've heard the audio, doesn't really marry up with how this is portraying that scenario, that entire scenario. So yeah, it's a bit of an odd one, because that makes sense. So for anyone who's unfamiliar with the entire situation, nobody who's been involved in social media and all they've got is this, then yeah, this paints a real horrific picture, and it makes sense. But from us who have been here since the beginning, we've heard the 911 call transcript. There's just a little bit of disconnect between what we see or what we hear in that call and how they portray it. But look, ultimately, you've got Hunter who goes in, he sees it, and he tries to shield them from it, and he is being hailed as kind of this hero. But again, the audio on the call, he acts a bit more nonchalant, and I think that could be explained away by what he's seen. And if he's seen it all and he knows maybe that's just at that point done him in, he would go on to say that, he hadn't slept after that. He didn't know whether someone was, it did fuck him up. Do you know what I mean? Which you can imagine if you walked in and saw that. It takes someone with a strong stomach to walk away from that unscathed mentally. So I get that. Do you know what I mean? I won't wish that on anybody. It's just, it makes you feel uncomfortable when how they portray it here doesn't quite marry up 100% with what you hear in the call. But they also obviously push out. They try to touch on stalking again. It's almost like they're going to go down the route of we must have been stalked. It's targeted. The law enforcement had told it was targeted. So automatically that's like, oh, if it was targeted, then we was being our group, if you like, have been being stalked for some time. When we're now down the track again, and I don't know how this is going to progress as we work away through the episodes, and I'll do them over the next 4 days. But you think to yourself, but law enforcement have obviously now got Brian Coburn, and they say there's no evidence of stalking, and they were quite adamant about that, and the fact that there is absolutely no connection. And, it doesn't really answer any questions about that. You just feel, are you going to go down this route of talking about the fact that you was being stalked and the person who stalked you did this? I don't know how this is going to play out, but do you know what I mean? It's all I can say about episode 1 is that it does bring you back down to earth. Brings you back down to earth that there is 4 people who have lost their lives, and that is fucking tragic. And I think that whether we're pro-burgers or whether we're guilters or whether we're down the middlers, I think everybody in their own way, they want the same thing. They want justice. They want, these 4 individuals who lost their life, for their deaths not to be completely in vain. The only other one thing that was a little bit uncomfortable to me, and I don't know whether it's because, again, we've learned certain things about certain individuals, but it was the Chapin family. Hunter Chapin and his mum just laughing when they're trying to talk and sort of being a bit giggly about it. And again, I get that some people, their idiosyncrasies are a little bit off at times, and some people laugh when they're nervous, or there's almost like a knee-jerk reaction to certain things. Maisie acted very, very differently. She was what you would expect from and don't get me wrong, Hunter was clearly upset. He was clearly upset, but it was just both him and his mum. There was just this undercurrent of like laughing, and it was odd. It was odd to me, but only because I've never ever seen that in this scenario. And I've been interested in true crime for decades. I'm 45 years old, so I've watched numerous, many, and I've never ever seen any family members talking about the murder of their relation, let alone a son or a brother, and they're kind of laughing. It was really odd. But no, that was episode 1. Again, just looking back over who they were and the fact that, the crime actually happened, and we've got up to the point where, yes, it's happened. They've just kind of figured out, because again, the fact that it seemed to take such a long while that the penny would drop and it'd be like, oh, where's Kaylee and Maddie? And you think they were literally there in the house. Do you know what I mean? These, Dylan Mortensen and Bethany Funk were literally in the house. They genuinely, when we think about all of the time they spent on their phones and the messaging and the attempts to call, neither of them thought to go and look around that house, to the point where they genuinely didn't know anything prior to law enforcement being called. It's just a fucking odd one. Let me know what you think. If you've seen it, let me know what you think down below. And like I say, I will watch the second part later on today, and I will come out tomorrow, and we'll do a video on part 2. I'll do them over the next, and then later on in the week, perhaps Sunday, we'll all come together in a live and we'll have a proper conversation about what has happened this week, because obviously we've got the hearing on the 17th, seeing whether they lift the gag order, yay or nay. I believe that they may not lift it, and they may want to leave it in place up until the sentencing, because up to the sentencing, Brian Kohberger could retract his plea. So then that would put them in quite the place if they had lifted the non-dissemination order, but we shall see. But anyway, look after yourself. You look absolutely amazing. Hit like if you haven't hit like already. Subscribe if you haven't already subscribed, and I will catch you all in the next one. Mwah.